I'm delighted today to be speaking with Harriette Hemmasi, who, as Stephanie mentioned, is the Dean of the Georgetown University Library. And before coming to Georgetown, she served as the University Librarian at Brown University, the Executive Associate Dean at Indiana University, and the Associate University Librarian at Rutgers. Her leadership focuses on advancing the role of the library through the use of digital tools and methodologies to enhance access and use and to support teaching and learning and research. So thank you so much for being here today, Harriette.
Thank you.
So to start, I wanted to ask that in a world in which so much information is available kind of instantaneously on my phone, what do you see is the role of the academic library?
So I think one of the problems that we all face is actually access to too much information. Information that is kind of just coming at us as if it all had the same merit and kind of value. One of the great things about libraries has been the attempt of librarians and often faculty who have helped shape collections in the library, is that the library becomes a cohesive representation of different subject areas. The fact that materials in the library are related to each other, not only to the books that they sit beside on the shelf or electronically, titles that may be accessed, but we know a lot about that information. We know in advance before you ever encounter it, as you can now encounter most anything on your phone, sometimes unexpectedly, things that you might not want to see. The library is a place that has been carefully curated, evaluated, and I would say the other thing is that people come into the library for a variety of reasons. People come to the library virtually as well as physically, usually foremost in an academic setting to gain access to scholarly content. But today, it's not enough just to have access to content. People also want to be able to use or reuse that content in very specific ways, using digital tools. Students preparing for assignments for their classes and especially term papers and so on often include visualizations, digital maps, maybe some kind of analysis or annotation of the original resources, and being able to include images as well as data analysis and so on is something that's very important in scholarship today. So the library provides a function within the university that is not only scholarly in nature, but I would also say there is this community aspect of the academic library. Many people think of the public library more as a community center, but we see students all hours of the day and night. We're open 24/7 during exam periods in a normal school year. And we're open until 2 a.m. Every day in a usual school year. So students congregate to study, but there's a blurred line between study and socialization. And today, of course, library has food. Students bring their own food, but they can get coffee at the Midnight Mug in the Lounger Library. So it becomes really a community center, an extension of the classroom, and also, I think, a center for scholarship, but scholarship that is not just about reading and writing, but also about experimenting with making and creating new forms of scholarship.
Thank you. So you mentioned, you described the community that is built around the library, and I think that's a very important idea. But of course, the pandemic has, in some sense, at least temporarily kind of suspended the physical community. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has changed the services which libraries like yours are providing to students and faculty.
Well, libraries have been hybrid in nature for actually a long time. For the past 20 years, at least, we've been purchasing more and more materials online. Today, more than 80% of our collections budget is spent for online materials rather than print materials, whether those are electronic journals, ebooks, databases, sometimes music, data itself, purchasing, online maps, many, many different things. So in that sense, the library is prepared, or I should say was prepared, to push out a lot of its information sources. But there has been more focus on virtual interaction or engagement. So the library is, if we think of it overall, collections and services and space. So collections, I think we did pretty well as far as being able to get content out. Services, a lot of our services are available today. I mean, in previous times before the pandemic, they were available both online and in person. So we've done a lot more work of in-person consultations, especially for students who need a special attention. So one example is senior students who are working on honors thesis or other kinds of senior projects. So extended and very kind of customized or personalized consultation sessions to talk about the research topic, finding the right kinds of materials, and just helping the student think through their work. And I would say the same thing with faculty, that we have worked a lot more closely with many faculty in preparing course materials, whether they are things that were online or things that we could scan according to copyright restrictions and so on, as well as some faculty research projects that really needed resources or services that were kind of difficult to supply in this virtual environment.
Thank you. I remember you mentioned to me in a previous conversation that you've also developed kind of ingenious ways to get physical books to people during this period. And I think there's like a book pickup service, is that right?
There is. And, one of the things that we've been surprised is how much faculty as well as students have wanted access to our print books. So legally, we can scan 1 or 2 chapters of a book, but we cannot scan major portions, of a book. So we scan when it's possible, but other times, especially for faculty or students who live nearby, we began offering a book pickup service so that we would check out the book for the faculty member or now the students also, and they can pick up the book outside the library. So we, schedule that pickup session and so on, just like if you're going to have your takeout food and so on. Yeah. And it's been very popular. The other thing that we've done, which I think nobody imagined that we might be doing this, but that is that when students who don't live locally or faculty who are not local and they need a book, a printed resource, if we have access to that resource, we talk to the student or the faculty member and to understand whether we might be able to find any substitute. But if there is not a substitute, we actually will mail the item to the student or to the faculty member. We never imagined that we would do that. You know, we receive interlibrary loan materials from other libraries through mail. But in this situation, we're kind of doing an interlibrary loan, but it's a library to person rather library to library. And this has worked very well, and we've not lost any books, and the books have been returned. And so it's been a happy outcome.
That's wonderful. Have you been surprised by anything that has come up in terms of what patrons want from the library during this period?
Well, I think the great thing, this is a pleasant surprise for us. It's not a total surprise, I guess, but that we have had a lot of activity in the library, meaning a lot of book pickup and also a lot of consultations and invitations to do virtual classes or bibliographic sessions. So that has been really a terrific thing. I think the other thing that we have noticed is that in part because many of the materials are not available online, or perhaps not easily available online, and there's been a greater desire to see access to print materials, we've had a lot of questions about copyright, because scanning then raises these issues of copyright. The other thing that I'll say is that publishers and Georgetown University Press is, I think, among the publishers that have really made a big effort to provide open access to materials that otherwise might cost us as a library a lot of money to provide. So that has been really a great thing. And I think the whole concept that we're all in this together has really shown itself to be a very positive influence during this time that students and faculty need access to scholarly information. And whereas we spend millions of dollars every year for materials, publishers have tried very, in a very significant manner to make access to these resources available to students and faculty, and therefore to libraries. So it's been a great partnership.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from a participant that actually pretty much anticipated the next thing I was going to ask you. So, so can you tell us a little bit about how you envision the role of libraries changing as we emerge from COVID? What will be the role of the academic library and the university of the future?
You know, I've thought a lot about that particular question. I think all of us who are in our different professions must have this on our mind. I know that you, Al, also think about the press. We've had conversations about this. And the academic library is really a reflection of the university in which it is situated. So Georgetown will be different from other universities, just as today the very wise decisions that President DeGioia and other members of senior administration made early on, that Georgetown would remain virtual, the teaching and learning would remain virtual this semester. So a lot does depend on how Georgetown itself considers its future. I think about the concept of transformation, and a lot of times people think of transformation of being some very kind of fancy new thing. Sometimes it's often associated with being bigger and shinier and brighter and so on. Transformation also has to do, I believe, with a kind of deep rethinking and reevaluation of what it is you do. And I think that this will be required of all of us at Georgetown, and really all of us as a nation, and potentially even worldwide. But when I think about the library, you know, in the past, many libraries have purchased large amounts of content just in case it might be needed in the future. Of course, that has always been the meaning of a research library, that research materials would be available, that you could go to your library and get whatever you need. Today, the way in which research libraries are able to share materials quickly with each other, and the fact that there is not one research library that is able to buy everything, I think we will be at Georgetown more focused on what does the user need at this particular time. It doesn't mean that we won't buy research type collections and build our collections, but I believe we'll be much more attentive to user needs at the point of need. And I think that that is true in terms of collections and also in terms of services. And I believe we've learned a lot during this pandemic that to be responsive to the need, there's no greater kind of service that we can offer.
Thank you. So I imagine, you know, like many parts of life, there are aspects of library life that will just immediately spring back to what they were, you know, before, I mean, when the health situation permits. So, you know, the opening hours you mentioned, and hopefully students, you know, enjoying the coffee shop and that kind of thing. But I was wondering if you feel there are things that will change permanently as a result of the pandemic, you know, for better or for worse. So you mentioned some innovations before that you've put in during this time. Do you think some of those things will be permanent changes for the library?
Well, you know, I think a really interesting statistic that we encountered this summer over the last 10 or 15 years, many universities and colleges have experimented with online teaching. And this summer, because of the dire situation at Georgetown, meaning that all of our classes would be online, I believe I've heard the number of 1,800 faculty were engaged in learning how they could improve their skills of teaching online. And I think that faculty were catching up with students. So you have children at home, I mean, children who are growing up, they're teenagers, I believe. We know that today's young people spend most of their time online. Outside of the classroom, probably a lot of faculty also spend time online. But the connection between how we live our daily life and how we kind of conduct the business of the university has been quite separate. And libraries have not had that luxury because many publishers now only produce materials online. I know that you have print runs as well as some online only materials, but much of what comes to the library, not just to Georgetown, but to any library, is primarily available online. And there's a huge preference for online access because it can be anytime, anywhere, any device. And so I think this is really speaking to the generation of students that we're encountering today. So I believe that the pandemic, in a way, has pushed us into the 21st century, into 2020, in a way that the academy had not yet kind of decided to land. So in many ways, I think the library will continue along these lines, and the whole concept of having the library as a hybrid environment and exercising the extremes of that. So the in-person, the intensity of being in person and being in connection with the physical item. We see this in special collections, that there are scans of materials online, but that only increases the desire of the students and the faculty to see the real thing. And so I think coming to the real in-person library will still be a very popular thing.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned at the beginning that you're particularly interested in, digital methodology and resources and how that can enhance teaching and research. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the library's role in, supporting online teaching. There's an obvious one in terms of the provision of course materials and that kind of thing, but are there skills, techniques, I suppose other ways in which the library is supporting online teaching and will continue to do so?
Yes. So one of the things that we spent quite a lot of time this summer was creating online tutorials that we would normally give in person. You're familiar, Al, and many probably of our listeners are familiar with the great range of databases that we have. And, when you search on your phone or even just open Google, you get back a whole range of things. But when you're looking for materials for a paper or for a class, you need to have a little bit more targeted search. So the concept of information literacy, how to search, what is it that you're researching, what is it that you're retrieving, and also then how do you save your searches, how do you save the content that you've searched, how do you manage all of that information that you might need for a research paper or for ongoing research such as doctoral research or faculty research. So the library does provide a lot of support in helping students learn about the research process, also the study process, and keeping track, also, as we talked about earlier before, of, okay, this is a great image, or this is a great video. How do you clip a video and embed it in your text, and how do you then save that and make sure that it can be available longer term? So one of the great services that the library offers to students as well as faculty is our digital repository. Now, many people, of course, understand the concept of a repository or an archive in the print world, but the digital repository is something that is very useful for students. So if students want to keep track of the materials that they have created during their course time at Georgetown, faculty can also keep track of the data that they have used, and also early versions of the publications, or when allowed by the publisher, the actual publication, the version of the final publication. So these are some of the ways in which we support online education. And I would say the other really great thing is that librarians spend a lot of time, often in collaboration with faculty, in developing additional reading list. So a library guide for a particular course or for a kind of a subject area. And those are often included in the Coursera software that is used on campus, both for in-person teaching and online teaching.
Thank you. So you mentioned money a couple of times earlier, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to, we're all aware of the financial situations of universities, and I don't mean Georgetown in particular, but if you could just speak a little bit to what libraries are likely to face in terms of budgets and how they might deal with that.
Well, again, in alliance with their university, their local university, academic libraries are very likely to experience budget cuts. And certainly that is a discussion at Georgetown. It has to be a discussion because we're living in reality, not in a kind of imaginary environment. And the reality is that university budgets overall are reduced because of the virtual instruction that is happening now. And so there will be a kind of reset. And that resetting of our collections budgets in particular, resetting probably of the number of staff that we are able to continue to have on site. And I think that it speaks to some of the work that libraries have been doing for a long time, and that is shared collections. So Georgetown in particular is part of the Washington Research Library Consortium, and we share collections, of course, through interlibrary loan. We've always shared collections with other libraries, but we have much less shared staffing. And I think that's something that we may need to address as these times go forward. I think the other important thing is not just about sharing staffing with potentially other libraries, but partnering with each other on campus. So you've done a lot of outreach, Al, since you've been at Georgetown, building really strong relationships with academic departments. And the same thing in the library. The library is not an island. It is connected to other service areas as well as academic schools and departments on this campus. And I think this sensitivity to understanding what the real needs are then will help us shape what our future will be, regardless of what our actual budgets are.
Great, thank you. So maybe just to conclude, I think one of the things that's come across very strongly is the idea that the library is both a kind of physical space and a community and a kind of set of services. So I was wondering if you could just talk about how those things interact and what the role of librarians are in the kind of physical space of the library.
So, you know, I think we have a different appreciation for virtual presence and physical presence. I mean, most of us have been deprived of any kind of physical presence beyond our immediate families and during this time. And I think that many of us have experienced the fact that we can talk to each other online, but it's very difficult to really begin to read the other person, especially when you are thinking about a reference interview. So people come into the library sometimes using words that aren't the words that they mean. It reminds me of when I try to say to the doctor, well, my left ear has bothered me, but I think it actually might be my right ear. I don't know how the doctor ever figures out, like, what the heck, is there anything wrong with this woman? You know, maybe it's between her ears that's wrong. But anyway, you know, the ability to listen, the ability to then kind of probe the question and to sense what it is that a student or a faculty member is really asking. And I think that is one of the great values that our personnel in the library adds, that there is this human interaction, this ability to discern, despite sometimes the words that are used, but to kind of piece together what it is the student or the faculty member is seeking, and then to begin to that process of going down the journey of building the case, building the questions, and also helping to find the resources and the kind of service that is most needed. So I think that's an irreplaceable value.
Thank you. I think that's a really good place to end. And unfortunately, we're out of our time, but I wanted to thank you so much for being here, Harriette, and for speaking with us. And just to let everyone know that in 2 weeks' time, on October 22nd, we're going to be talking with Jessica Triscoe-Darden, who's a professor at American University, about gender dynamics in a time of crisis. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Stay safe and healthy, and hope to see you in a couple weeks' time. Take care. Bye-bye.